These men didn't just play tough guys on screen, they were tough guys in real life. The kind of men who could break your jaw with one punch and then go right back to filming their scenes. But what's even more remarkable, they brought that real-world toughness into their iconic roles. Hollywood's toughest stars didn't just act like heroes, fighters, and warriors. Many lived lives just as dangerous and dramatic as their on-screen personas. These were real men who had already experienced the grit of life and carried it into their craft, giving their performances an authenticity that couldn't be faked. Today, we're diving into the shocking truth behind the 10 toughest actors in cinema history. These men brought unmatched strength, resilience, and courage to the silver screen. What makes number 4 on our list particularly jaw-dropping? Studio execs tried desperately to keep his background a secret because they feared audiences wouldn't believe the truth about him. But before we start this incredible journey into Hollywood's untold history, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I read every one of them and love connecting with fellow classic film enthusiasts around the world. Let's kick things off with perhaps the most legitimately tough actor in Hollywood history. A man whose real-life exploits are so legendary, they might seem unbelievable if they weren't so thoroughly documented. Enter Audi Murphy. When you think of Hollywood tough guys, names like John Wayne or Clint Eastwood likely come to mind. But the real toughest man to ever grace the silver screen was none other than Audi Murphy. Standing at just 5 feet 5 inches with a baby face that looked more innocent than intimidating, directors often struggled to cast him in action roles. Yet, Murphy was without question the most decorated American combat soldier of World War II. At just 19 years old, Murphy single-handedly held off an entire company of German soldiers for over an hour, then led a successful counterattack while wounded and out of ammunition. For this extraordinary act of valor, he received the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration in the US, but that was just one chapter in Murphy's astounding military career. By the time he was 21, Murphy had earned 28 military medals, including every American Combat Award for valor. He destroyed enemy tanks, charged machine gun nests on his own, and continued to fight despite being wounded multiple times. Hollywood discovered him when his heroics landed him on the cover of Life magazine. But casting him in roles wasn't easy. His boyish, unthreatening appearance had many doubting his ability to portray a tough guy. In fact, when Murphy arrived for his first screen test, security guards didn't even believe he was the war hero they were expecting. Despite looking like an unlikely candidate for tough guy roles, Murphy was arguably more lethal than any other actor in Hollywood. Military historians estimate he killed between 240 and 300 enemy soldiers during his service, more than many entire military units. He even portrayed himself in the autobiographical film To Hell and Back, where he had to tone down some of his real-life feats because producers worried audiences wouldn't believe them. Murphy's post-war life was riddled with personal struggles. He suffered from severe PTSD, haunted by nightmares and often sleeping with a loaded pistol under his pillow. His second wife, Wanda Hendricks, once described Murphy as having two completely different sides, shy and soft-spoken in public, but a hardened killer when those nightmares overtook him. Yet, through it all, Murphy maintained incredible self-control. In a rare public display of his combat instincts, he once terrified a businessman with his swift and dangerous reaction during a heated argument. The man later said, "I suddenly realized I was looking into the eyes of someone who could kill me without hesitation." What makes Murphy's story particularly remarkable is that, unlike many on our list, he never sought out tough guy roles. In fact, he preferred romantic and comedic parts, hoping to escape his violent past. But behind his gentle demeanor was a man who had seen and done more than most could imagine. 2. Charles Bronson. Before he became one of cinema's toughest icons, Charles Bronson lived a life filled with hardship that would have broken most people. Born Charles Bakinski in Pennsylvania, Bronson grew up as one of 15 children in a coal mining family. By the age of 10, he was already working in the mines to help support his family, spending long days in the darkness of the tunnels. Bronson rarely spoke about his childhood, but he did once say, "I suppose I'm attracted to these roles because of my background. I was raised in violent neighborhoods and saw killing firsthand. We lived with death, starvation, and misery." The signature Bronson look, the weathered face, the suspicious squint, the grimace, wasn't an act. These were the marks of a man who spent his youth fighting for survival in coal mines and violent neighborhoods. His true trial by fire, however, came during World War II. As a B-29 aerial gunner, Bronson flew 25 combat missions over Japan and earned a Purple Heart for wounds sustained in battle. After the war, Bronson worked over 50 different jobs before landing acting roles. Yet even then, he was often cast as thugs, convicts, or Native Americans, thanks to his intimidating appearance. But what set him apart from other tough guys was the authenticity he brought to his roles. He didn't just perform stunts, he performed real fights that looked like they could have happened outside of a movie set. Colleagues often commented on Bronson's surprising physical strength. Despite standing only 5 feet 9 inches, his frame reflected a lifetime of hard labor and boxing. One co-star, Jan Michael Vincent, recalled, "During a scene where he was supposed to grab my shirt, I could feel the incredible strength in his hands." Bronson's authenticity didn't end with his physicality. After his portrayal of vigilante Paul Kersey in Death Wish, he received mafia death threats. But instead of seeking bodyguards like most stars, Bronson simply responded, "Unlike other stars who might have sought protection, I don't need it." Director Michael Winner, who worked with Bronson on several films, said it best, "Charles doesn't act tough. He simply is tough." 3. Lee Marvin. Lee Marvin didn't just play intimidating characters, he was the very type of dangerous man he often portrayed. Before Hollywood stardom, Marvin served in the Marines during World War II, fighting in some of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific Theater. He fought in the Battle of Saipan, where he was severely wounded by machine gun fire that left him with a permanent limp. For his bravery, Marvin was awarded the Purple Heart, though he rarely spoke about his time in combat. When he did, he was always brutally honest about the horrors he witnessed. Unlike some actor veterans who romanticized their service, Marvin offered no illusions. He once said bluntly, "First was a Marine sniper in the Pacific. I got shot in the ass and sent home. That's the truth." And truth was something Marvin carried into every role, unflinching, unsentimental, and brutally real. "Any man who says he enjoyed combat is either a liar or a fool," Marvin once remarked. That kind of raw honesty made him uniquely qualified to portray violence on screen. Director John Borman, who directed Point Blank, said of Marvin, "Lee understood violence in a way most actors never will. When Marvin played a killer, you weren't watching a performance. You were watching a man who had seen death firsthand and brought that experience with him to the screen." Marvin's military background gave him a rare perspective on violence. In films like The Dirty Dozen and The Killers, his portrayal of hardened men felt chillingly authentic because it came from a real place. He wasn't pretending to be dangerous, he was dangerous. Fellow actors often described a tension in the air when Marvin arrived on set. James Coburn, himself no stranger to tough guy roles, once said, "When Lee walked onto a set, there was an immediate shift in the atmosphere. Everyone straightened up a bit. There was something genuinely dangerous about him." One legendary example of Marvin's real-world grit happened during a bar fight in Oregon. While filming, Marvin ended up brawling with an entire crew of lumberjacks. Despite being in his 40s, he held his own against several younger men until state police intervened. The next morning, he showed up to set, bruised, unshaven, but completely unbothered. No complaints, no medical excuses. What made Marvin even more compelling was his combination of brawler toughness and intellectual depth. Despite his hard drinking reputation, Marvin was thoughtful about his craft and life. Director Samuel Fuller, who worked with him on The Big Red One, recalled, "Lee had experienced the worst of humanity during the war, and that gave him a philosophical outlook you wouldn't expect. He could quote Hemingway one minute, then demonstrate a Marine-style disarm the next." In an era when many actors were simply play-acting violence, Marvin embodied it. He didn't need to perform menace, he radiated it. As Roger Ebert once wrote, "When Lee Marvin threatens someone in a movie, you believe it, because Lee Marvin could actually carry out that threat." 4. Steve McQueen wasn't just Hollywood's king of cool. He was the real-life embodiment of danger, speed, and rebellion. While others cultivated a tough guy image, McQueen lived it, often taking real risks that would send a modern studio executive into a panic. His tough beginnings were no performance. Abandoned by his father and abused by a stepfather, McQueen ran away from home at 14. He eventually joined the US Marine Corps in 1947, where he was anything but a model soldier. Demoted 7 times for insubordination and once jailed for going AWOL, McQueen eventually turned things around, just in time to save 5 Marines during an Arctic training accident when their tank fell through ice. After his honorable discharge, McQueen bounced from job to job, oil rigger, lumberjack, even a carnival barker, before finding acting. But unlike other stars who left their hard-knocked past behind, McQueen doubled down on it. He was a professional-level racer, competing in high-stakes auto and motorcycle events under pseudonyms to avoid studio interference. When he filmed The Great Escape, McQueen did all his own motorcycle stunts, except for the now iconic fence jump, which the studio forbade him from attempting. Still, his racing credentials weren't just for show. In 1970, he placed second in the 12 Hours of Sebring endurance race, with a cast on his foot. That's not Hollywood magic, that's raw grit. His stunt double and close friend Bud Eakins once said, "Steve wasn't playing at being a racer or a tough guy. He was both. I've known professional racers who weren't as gutsy as Steve." McQueen's commitment to doing his own dangerous scenes was legendary. On the set of The Sand Pebbles, he nearly drowned during a river scene when the current dragged him under. During The Towering Inferno, he insisted on working with live fire, pulling off stunts that even seasoned professionals avoided. Director John Sturges once noted, "The problem with Steve wasn't getting him to do dangerous stunts. It was trying to stop him from doing the truly life-threatening ones." And when McQueen found out that he was on the Manson family's hit list, his response was pure McQueen. No bodyguards, no high-tech security. He simply started carrying a loaded Magnum pistol. Quiet, direct, lethal. Racing legend Mario Andretti summed it up best. Hollywood had a lot of actors playing tough guys, but Steve actually was what most of them were pretending to be. 5. Kirk Douglas. Before Kirk Douglas became a Hollywood icon, he was just a hungry kid named Isur Danielovich, growing up in poverty so crushing that food was a luxury. The son of poor Jewish immigrants, he earned his first pennies selling snacks to mill workers, setting the tone for a life powered by relentless determination. But Douglas wasn't just mentally tough, he was physically formidable too. He wrestled competitively, earning a scholarship to St. Lawrence University thanks to his strength and skill. This wasn't the flashy, scripted wrestling of TV fame. It was raw collegiate grappling that required genuine grit. Douglas served in the US Navy during World War II as a communications officer on a submarine chaser. These ships operated in some of the most dangerous waters of the war, constantly under threat. He sustained injuries during his service, leading to a medical discharge in 1944. While his service might not be as combat decorated as others on this list, what set Douglas apart was his indomitable will. On film sets, he had a reputation for sheer force of personality. Director Stanley Kubrick, known for being a control freak, once admitted, Kirk was a force of nature. When he decided something was going to happen, it happened. Period. Douglas's combination of physical prowess and uncompromising ambition made him one of the few stars who could carry epic films with pure presence. Spartacus wasn't just a role, it was a declaration. Douglas famously defied Hollywood's blacklist by hiring blacklisted writer Dalton Trumbo to pen the screenplay, effectively ending the era of McCarthyism in film. While other stars played heroes, Douglas fought like one, on and off screen. He was known to challenge directors, stand up to studios, and once physically confront a fellow actor for disrespecting a crew member. His toughness wasn't an image, it was who he was. For Spartacus, Douglas didn't just act the part, he lived it. He trained extensively with ex-gladiators and professional wrestlers to bring authenticity to the film's brutal fight scenes. During one particularly dangerous stunt, Douglas insisted on performing a high-risk fall himself, ignoring warnings from the stunt coordinator. The resulting injury would have benched most actors for weeks. Douglas, he was back on set in 2 days. Co-stars frequently commented on his imposing physicality and no-nonsense presence. Burt Lancaster, himself a former circus acrobat and no stranger to tough roles, once said, "Kirk approaches acting like a physical confrontation. He doesn't just perform a scene, he attacks it." Douglas's real-life toughness extended well beyond the screen. In 1991, he survived a catastrophic helicopter crash that killed 2 other people and left him with serious back injuries. Already in his 70s, Douglas endured a grueling rehabilitation process and ultimately regained his ability to walk, a feat of sheer willpower. Then in 1996, a massive stroke robbed him of his speech. Most men would have quietly retired. Not Douglas. He launched into years of therapy, eventually regaining enough speech to write a book about his recovery, My Stroke of Luck, turning his personal battle into a public inspiration. Director Howard Hawks, who worked with many of Hollywood's classic tough guys, once observed, "There were plenty of actors who looked tough, but Kirk actually was tough. The difference was in the eyes. You could see a man who had fought his way through life." Douglas rarely bragged, but in his autobiography he revealed his personal philosophy. "I've always believed you tell a person, no, 3 times. Then, if they're still standing there, you might have to hit them." It wasn't bluster, it was the voice of a man shaped by hardship and survival. 6. James Kagny. At just 5 feet 5 inches tall, James Kagny wasn't an imposing figure, but pound for pound, he may have been the toughest man in classic Hollywood. His toughness wasn't born in a gym, it was forged in the brutal streets of New York's Lower East Side. Growing up surrounded by gangs, violence wasn't an abstract concept for Kagny, it was a daily reality. To survive, he learned to box, not for sport, but for self-defense. Small in stature, Kagny developed lightning-fast hands and deadly footwork, skills that later became trademarks of his explosive on-screen fights. Unlike the stylized fisticuffs of his peers, Kagny's fight scenes were sharp, sudden, and brutally efficient, because he wasn't pretending. Director Raoul Walsh, who worked with him on White Heat, once said, "Jimmy knew how to throw a punch better than any actor I ever worked with, because he'd thrown plenty of real ones." Kagny's talents extended beyond fighting. A classically trained dancer, his background in choreography gave him uncanny control over his movements. This combination of agility and real-world experience made his screen brawls some of the most convincing ever filmed. Co-stars often found out the hard way just how real his intensity could be. During The Public Enemy, actress Mae Clarke wasn't warned that Kagny would actually slam a grapefruit into her face for real. Her startled reaction became iconic. And more than once, Kagny's stage punches connected harder than planned. Off-screen, Kagny was equally formidable. Bob Hope once joked, Jimmy was the kind of guy who, if you tried something funny with him, would drop you where you stood, and then help you up and dust you off. Hollywood may have been full of actors playing gangsters, but Kagny had the kind of streetwise toughness that made even real gangsters think twice. When asked in a 1973 interview about his ability to handle himself, Kagny simply said, "I know how to handle myself. Always have. When you're my size and grow up where I did, you either learn to fight, or you get used to eating dirt. I preferred standing." 7. John Wayne. John Wayne wasn't just Hollywood's ultimate cowboy, he was built like one. Before the legend, there was Marion Morrison, a hard-working boy raised in the rugged landscapes of Iowa and California. Physical labor was part of daily life, and it left its mark. At 6 feet 4 inches and powerfully built, Wayne originally made his mark not in film, but on the football field. He earned a scholarship to the University of Southern California before a career-ending injury redirected him toward Hollywood. Even before acting, he worked as a prop man and stunt double, regularly hauling equipment that took 3 men to lift. Wayne's physical resilience became the stuff of legend. During the filming of The Alamo, he performed a dangerous horsefall that cracked several ribs. Rather than taking time off, he simply had him taped and kept going, directing, producing, and starring in the film with barely a complaint. Director John Ford, who directed Wayne in some of his most iconic roles, once said, "Duke's toughness isn't an act. I've seen him outwork, outlast, and outfight men half his age. He's made of something different than most." But perhaps the most chilling chapter of Wayne's story came with The Conqueror. Filmed downwind of a Nevada nuclear test site, the production exposed cast and crew to radioactive fallout. Out of 220 people on the shoot, 91 would later develop cancer, including Wayne, who died of stomach cancer in 1979. Many believe the exposure was no coincidence. Even in his final years, Wayne showed unshakable resolve. On the set of The Greatest Story Ever Told, he tore ligaments in his shoulder during a fall, but instead of halting production, he had it bandaged during lunch and finished the day's shoot. Max von Sydow, his co-star, remembered, there was no question of him stopping. It simply wasn't in his nature. And when Wayne battled cancer not once, but twice, first lung cancer, then stomach, he faced it with the same bulldog tenacity. In interviews, he never played the victim. He was Duke Wayne to the end, stoic, iron-willed, and absolutely unbreakable. 8. John Wayne. After losing a lung and several ribs to cancer in 1964, John Wayne shocked everyone by returning to stunt work just months later in The Sons of Katie Elder. Director Henry Hathaway recalled trying to talk him out of it. Wayne refused, saying, "Either I do my own stunts or you get someone else." His toughness wasn't just on screen, it was in his bones. Even Kirk Douglas, a political rival, admitted, "Don't question the man's toughness." 9. Robert Mitchum. Mitchum didn't play tough, he was tough. A Depression-era drifter, ditch digger, and boxer, he once served time on a chain gang for vagrancy. His screen presence came from real-life hardship, not training. As director Edward Dmytryk said, he simply was tough. When jailed in a 1948 drug scandal, Mitchum took it in stride, and returned more respected than ever. His cool came from survival, not performance. 10. Anthony Quinn. Quinn's strength came from experience, not image. Born amid the Mexican Revolution and raised in poverty, he worked hard labor and boxed to support his family. His power on set was legendary, lifting massive logs in Zorba the Greek and climbing cliffs in the guns of Navarone without stunt help. Yet his strength came with sensitivity. Sophia Loren said it best, "The body of a warrior, the soul of a poet." 11. Charlton Heston. Before Hollywood, Heston flew combat missions in World War II. On screen, he pushed himself relentlessly, from filming the Ten Commandments in desert heat to performing his own stunts in Ben-Hur's chariot race. For the agony and the ecstasy, he endured muscle spasms to accurately portray Michelangelo. Off-screen, he also showed moral courage, marching with Dr. King in the 1960s. Director Franklin Schaffner said, "Chuck embodied heroism. These weren't just tough guys in the movies, they were tough in real life. Men who brought lived experience to the screen, shaped by war, hardship, and grit." Who impressed you most? Mitchum's quiet menace, Wayne's resilience, or Quinn's powerful grace? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the golden age of Hollywood. Thanks for watching.